The 70s gave us some of the greatest music ever made. It also gave us songs so spectacularly ridiculous that the decade has never quite lived it down. These weren't just bad songs, and they were enormous hits. And then, almost overnight, everyone agreed to pretend they never happened. Here are the 10 ridiculous song flops of the 70s literally nobody remembers. Number 10. My Ding-A-Ling by Chuck Berry, 1972.
Told me it was my ding-a-ling-a-ling, oh.
Let's start with the most baffling entry on this list because this one comes with a genuinely embarrassing footnote. Chuck Berry was a founding father of rock and roll. His guitar work on songs like Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven, and Maybelline helped lay the foundation for everything that came after him in popular music. Keith Richards idolized the man. The Beatles covered his songs. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame essentially wouldn't exist without Chuck Berry. And then, in 1972, the only song he ever took to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 was a live recording of a juvenile double entendre novelty song about a toy bell. That's it. That's the whole joke. He performed it at the Lanchester Arts Festival in Coventry, England, and the audience participation was apparently enthusiastic enough that the recording captured lightning in a bottle. Within months, it was sitting at the top of the American charts, displacing, among other things, Elvis Presley's Burning Love, which peaked at number 2. Keith Richards reportedly said he found the whole thing mortifying on Berry's behalf.
But held on to my ding-a-ling-a-ling, oh.
The BBC tried to ban the song, not quite knowing what to make of it. A handful of American radio stations refused to play it. None of that stopped it from selling. It spent 2 weeks at number 1 in the US in November 1972, and also topped the UK charts. Berry had scored dozens of rock and roll classics over the previous 2 decades, none of which came close to matching the commercial peak of a song about a toy bell. And now, almost nobody mentions it. You'd be hard-pressed to find a greatest hits of Chuck Berry compilation that leads with it, even though it's technically his most successful single. It tends to get left quietly in the back of the discography, like a relative everyone remembers but nobody brings up at family gatherings. Number 9. The Streak by Ray Stevens, 1974. By the spring of 1974, college campuses across the United States were in the grip of a truly strange fad. Streaking, running naked through public spaces, sporting events, graduation ceremonies, television broadcasts, had somehow become the thing to do. It was everywhere briefly, and then it was absolutely not anywhere anymore. Ray Stevens, a Nashville-based novelty songwriter who had already scored a hit with Ahab the Arab back in 1962, and a legitimate pop chart topper with the gospel-influenced Everything is Beautiful in 1970, took one look at the streaking craze and wrote a song about it in a matter of days. He later recalled noticing a short item about streaking in a news magazine on a flight and thinking it was a great idea for a song. His instincts were correct, commercially speaking.
There's an audience to be found. You'll be streaking around.
The Streak is structured as a fake radio news report, with Stevens playing both a deadpan correspondent and a yokel eyewitness who repeatedly warns his wife Ethel not to look. It's a 3-minute joke. Literally nothing more than that. And it spent 3 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1974. It sold over 5 million copies internationally. It hit number 1 in the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. By the Billboard year-end tally, it was the 3rd biggest song of 1974.
Once again, everyone, your Action News reporter in the booth at the gym covering the...
Just days after Stevens recorded the track, a man named Robert Opel streaked live across the stage at the 46th Academy Awards, dashing behind presenter David Niven in front of millions of television viewers. Niven, keeping his composure in a way that felt almost superhuman, quipped that the man was simply showing off his shortcomings. The timing couldn't have been better for the song.
Oh, yes, they call him the Streak.
And then streaking stopped being funny, and the song stopped existing, culturally speaking. 50 years later, Ray Stevens is best known to older audiences as a prolific country comedy act. The Streak is a footnote. The whole fad is a footnote. That's how completely a #1 record can evaporate when the trend it was built on dies. Number 8. Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks, 1974.
Bye to you, my trusted friend.
The original version of this song was written by Belgian singer Jacques Brel in 1961 under the title Le Moribond, which translates rather appropriately as The Dying Man. The American poet Rod McKuen translated it into English and titled it Seasons in the Sun. Harry Belafonte recorded it. The Beach Boys recorded it but decided against releasing it. Then Terry Jacks, a Canadian singer-songwriter, heard the Beach Boys version, re-recorded it himself, and released it in early 1974.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
What followed was one of the most commercially successful pieces of soft pop misery the decade produced. Seasons in the Sun is a song in which a dying man says farewell to his father, his best friend, and his wife, with the implication, in the original Brel version, that the wife and the friend had been carrying on an affair behind his back. Jack softened that implication considerably. What he left in was the cheerful, melodic bounce, a chorus that lodged itself in the brain with terrifying efficiency, and a general sense of damp, sentimental gloom that somehow went to #1 for 3 weeks in the United States in February 1974.
But the hills that we climbed were just seasons out of time.
It also hit #1 in Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and several European countries. It sold somewhere north of 14 million copies globally. For a brief window of early 1974, it was one of the most heard songs on the planet.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
Critics hated it. Rolling Stone was not kind. Radio disc jockeys who were forced to play it on rotation reportedly found it difficult. Terry Jacks later said he was never really happy with how it turned out either, which is a complicated thing to feel about a song that sold 14 million copies. His follow-up single, If You Go Away, another Rod McKuen adaptation, did not replicate the success, and Jacks quietly faded from the charts.
Would always come around and get my feet back on the ground.
Today, Seasons in the Sun appears occasionally on lists of the worst songs of the decade, alongside bemused Wikipedia entries and a few nostalgic radio throwbacks. The song that outsold almost everything of 1974 is mainly remembered now as a cautionary example of what happened when a decade's tendency toward overwrought sentiment fully escaped its own leash.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
Number 7. Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille, 1976.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
Before you say anything, yes, this was a real song. It charted at #4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976. Yes, it was performed by Captain and Tennille, who were at the time one of the most commercially successful acts in pop music. Fresh off their #1 hit, Love Will Keep Us Together. And yes, it is a song about two muskrats falling in love and dancing and doing whatever muskrats do on a Saturday night.
And they whirl and they twirl and they tangle.
The song was originally written by Willis Allen Ramsey and appeared on his self-titled debut album in 1972 under the title Muskrat Candlelight. America, the soft rock group, recorded an early version and charted with it before Captain and Tennille released their version. Daryl Dragon, the Captain, arranged it, and Tony Tennille sang it with a degree of commitment that the subject matter probably didn't strictly require.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
The sound effects were real. Dragon recorded actual muskrat noises and wove them into the track. The squeaking and rustling of two semi-aquatic rodents in a romantic situation made it onto a top 5 Billboard record in 1976.
Singing and jinging a jangle.
The song received perhaps its most notable cultural moment when President Gerald Ford invited Captain and Tennille to perform at a state dinner for Queen Elizabeth II in 1976. They performed Muskrat Love. This was the song chosen to represent American popular culture to the Queen of England. Queen Elizabeth was reportedly unmoved, a reaction that seems entirely reasonable under the circumstances. When the duo appeared on their short-lived CBS television variety show in 1976 and 1977, they performed the song with animated muskrats on screen. The show was eventually canceled. Captain and Tanille divorced in 2014 after 39 years of marriage. Muskrat Love outlasted the marriage, which is perhaps the most improbable legacy a song about muskrats could possibly have.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
Number 6. Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas, 1974.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
This one starts with a detail that says everything you need to know about how the music industry works. Carl Douglas was a Jamaican-British singer who had been working as a session vocalist in London. In 1974, producer Bidu hired him to record a track called I Want to Give You My Everything as his A-side. They needed something for the B-side. There were about 10 minutes of studio time left. Douglas had some lyrics kicking around about watching kung fu movies and seeing kids doing karate moves on the street. They knocked out a quick track. That B-side was Kung Fu Fighting. It took 10 minutes to record. 2 takes. Bidu later said he went over the top on the martial arts sound effects, the huzz and the haws, precisely because nobody was taking the B-side seriously. Nobody was going to listen to it anyway. By late 1974, it was the #1 song in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and Australia. It sold 11 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling singles ever released. By any measure, it is not a flop. What it is a song recorded in 10 minutes as a joke B-side by a session singer that outsold almost everything else that year, and then almost completely defined and ended that singer's career in one stroke. The timing was, as they say, everything. Bruce Lee had died in 1973, but his films were still in wide release. The TV series Kung Fu, starring David Carradine, had been running since 1972 and was drawing massive audiences. The entire world was briefly, intensely interested in martial arts, and a disco track with karate sound effects hit at exactly the right moment. Douglas was referred to afterward as a one-hit wonder, a label that was technically accurate and almost impossibly strange given the scale of the hit. He released follow-up singles that didn't come close to the same level of success. The song eventually found second life in compilations, film soundtracks, and advertising, where it has been used and reused for decades. But Carl Douglas himself? Ask someone under 50 who Carl Douglas is. The name means almost nothing. The song means everything. That's about as complete a decoupling of artist and catalog as pop music ever produces. Number 5. Disco Duck by Rick Dees and his Cast of Idiots, 1976. Rick Dees was a drive-time disc jockey working at WMPS Radio in Memphis, Tennessee in 1976. The disco craze was in full swing, and like a lot of people watching it unfold, he found it at least partially absurd. He wrote Disco Duck in one day at his apartment, then spent 3 months trying to convince anyone to record it with him, because nobody wanted to perform a song that required someone to do a passable Donald Duck impression while dancing to a 4-on-the-floor beat. The Duck vocals were eventually provided by a man named Ken Pruitt, an acquaintance of Dees. Pruitt moved away before the song became popular and was never properly credited in the promotional materials. The track was recorded at a small Memphis studio, initially pressed on a local label called Free-Tone, and began spreading across the South before the national label RSO picked it up for wider distribution. On October 16, 1976, Disco Duck reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, a position it held for 1 week. It sold over 6 million copies. It won a People's Choice Award for Favorite New Song. It was nominated for a Grammy for Best Arrangement for Voices, and it appeared briefly in the film Saturday Night Fever, though Dees' manager, in a decision he was presumably haunted by for years, turned down the offer to include it on the film's soundtrack album, fearing it would compete with sales of Dees' own record. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack has since sold over 40 million copies worldwide. That decision aged the way you'd expect. The truly bizarre postscript to this story is what happened at the radio station where Dees worked. Management refused to let him play his own song on the air, citing conflict of interest. When he merely mentioned on air that it was close to number 1, they fired him. He was fired 5 days before Disco Duck actually reached number 1. He was quickly hired by a rival Memphis station, WHBQ, where he played the song freely. His career trajectory eventually took him to Los Angeles and the long-running weekly Top 40 countdown syndication, which ran for decades. Number 4, Shannon by Henry Gross, 1976. Henry Gross was a founding member of the rock and roll revival group Shannon, the band that performed at Woodstock in 1969. By 1976, he had gone solo and released a ballad that went to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, reached number 1 in Canada, and then became the unexpected centerpiece of one of the most famous radio meltdowns in broadcasting history. Shannon is a song about the death of a dog. Specifically, it was inspired by a conversation Gross had over lunch with Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys. Wilson mentioned that his Irish setter, named Shannon, had recently been killed by a car. Gross went home and wrote the song in about 20 minutes. He later said it just came out, fully formed. He sent Wilson a cassette demo of the finished song, which Wilson eventually used as a sort of conceptual guide when trying to record his own version with full studio production. Wilson ultimately didn't release it. Gross recorded it himself and put it out on the Lifesong label. The song was a genuine hit, but in 1985, 9 years after the song charted, a fan wrote to Casey Kasem's American Top 40 radio program and requested Shannon as a long-distance dedication for his own recently deceased dog, named Snuggles. Kasem's producers placed the song immediately after the Pointer Sisters' up-tempo dance track, Dare Me, without warning him about the context. Kasem, unable to make the emotional gear shift from a bouncy pop number to a weepy tribute to a dead pet, lost his composure during taping. The resulting outtake audio, which eventually leaked and circulated widely, featured Kasem delivering an extraordinary eruption of frustration that became, over time, one of the most replayed pieces of behind-the-scenes radio history ever captured. Number 3, Billy Don't Be a Hero by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods, 1974. Billy Don't Be a Hero was originally recorded by a British band called Paper Lace. They had written it as a gentle anti-war ballad, technically set against the backdrop of the American Civil War, though pretty much everyone understood it as a reference to the Vietnam era. The woman in the song begs her soldier boyfriend not to do anything heroic. He does something heroic anyway. He dies. She receives a letter. End of song. Paper Lace were planning to release it themselves in the United States when a group from Ohio called Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods got there first with a competing version. The Haywoods recording beat Paper Lace to American radio and went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks in June 1974. Paper Lace did eventually have their own American hit later that year with The Night Chicago Died, which contained its own set of historical inaccuracies, but that's another story. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods had their moment, their gold record, and their 2 weeks at the top of the charts. Then they had essentially nothing. The group never came close to replicating that success, and the song itself has aged in the peculiar way that very sincere, very earnest songs about heavy subjects sometimes do when they're wrapped in the production style of a 1974 AM radio hit. The sentiment is genuine. The arrangement is what it is. The combination has not worn especially well.
Billy, don't be a hero. Come back and make me.
Number 2, Ben by Michael Jackson, 1972. There is a 1971 horror film called Willard about a socially isolated young man who befriends a colony of rats and eventually uses them to exact revenge on the people who have wronged him. It was popular enough to spawn a 1972 sequel called Ben, which followed the story of the most intelligent rat from the original film, as he befriended a lonely and sickly young boy named Danny. The film needed a title song. Michael Jackson was 13 years old at the time. His label, Motown, assigned him a ballad written by Don Black and Walter Scharf that was originally intended for Donny Osmond. The song is a tender, aching love song addressed to a friend who has always been there, someone the singer understands and who understands him in return. It is a genuinely beautiful performance. Jackson's voice at 13 was something extraordinary. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1972 and became his first solo number 1. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song. He performed it at the ceremony wearing a bow tie and what appeared to be complete sincerity. The subject of the song was a rat, not a metaphorical rat, a literal rat, the protagonist of a sequel to a horror film about a man using rodents as weapons. Jackson himself later acknowledged the absurdity of the situation. He said in interviews that he never thought about it as being directed at a rat while he was singing it. He thought of it as a general song about loneliness and friendship. That may be entirely true. The interpretation as a piece of pure performance works completely without the context. With the context, the song becomes one of the more perfectly strange artifacts in pop music history. A transcendent vocal performance by a teenage prodigy, recorded in service of a rodent's emotional journey through a low-budget horror sequel. Ben remains in the Michael Jackson catalog, occasionally acknowledged in retrospectives and documentaries. But in the casual conversation about his legacy, it tends not to come up first. What tends not to come up at all is the rat. Number 1, Wildfire by Michael Martin Murphey, 1975. And to close out this list, something that manages to be simultaneously beautiful, platinum certified, and deeply, deeply strange. Wildfire was written by Michael Martin Murphey and Larry Kanzler in the late 1960s, though Murphy later said it came to him almost fully formed in a dream while he was a student at UCLA working on a demanding project for producer Kenny Rogers. The song was inspired, he said, by a Native American legend his grandfather had told him about a ghost horse. The result was a 3.5-minute story song about a young woman, or possibly her ghost, calling out to her horse named Wildfire, who has run off in a blizzard and apparently died. The opening lines establish that the girl herself may have died in the winter storm. It is possible, and some listeners have argued this for decades, that both the girl and the horse are ghosts, and the entire song takes place in the afterlife. The lyrics include a reference to Sod Bustin', which famously bewildered late-night host David Letterman for weeks in 2007, leading to him inviting Murphy onto the show to discuss the song's more opaque passages. Released in February 1975, Wildfire reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart, displacing Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain and Tanile. It was eventually certified platinum for sales of over 2 million copies in the United States. It's one of the more melancholy songs to hit those chart positions in the decade. Plaintive, atmospheric, genuinely haunting in the right listening conditions. Today, if you ask people over 60, some of them will remember it immediately and feel something. If you ask people under 50, the number drops sharply. And if you describe the plot, a ghost girl calling to her dead horse through a blizzard, both of them running across the prairie in some sort of spectral reunion, and tell them it was a top 3 platinum-selling hit in 1975, most people will look at you the same way they might if you told them number 4 on this list was a song about muskrats, which of course it was. There's something almost comforting about going back through this era and finding all these records, songs that sold millions, songs that sat at number 1, songs that people genuinely loved for a season, just sitting there, mostly forgotten. The 70s had an appetite for the strange and the sentimental that the music industry was perfectly happy to feed, and the charts reflect that in ways that are alternately wonderful and baffling. Most of these songs were never meant to outlast their moment. A few of them tried to and failed anyway. All of them are worth at least one more listen, if only to remind yourself what the world sounded like when a song about a ghost horse could go platinum. If you enjoyed this trip back through the decade, hit like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from.